Updating the national defense strategy is underway for the Biden administration in the fiscal 2022 budget request. The White House wants to focus on modernizing military capabilities through, quote, leading first with diplomacy. Stacie Pettyjohn is Senior Fellow and Director of the Defense Program at the Center for a New American Security. She's writing about future strategy and force options for the Defense Department for CNAS. Stacie, you outline 3 possible defense strategies in your report, and you conclude that what you're calling the high-end deterrence strategy is the best path forward. What is that and why?
The high-end deterrence strategy, as its name indicates, is focused on preventing a great power war in Asia or Europe by being able to defeat an invasion force. It prioritizes China over Russia and future modernization over current capacity. And we conclude that this is the best path forward because defeating a Chinese or a Russian invasion is not only the most challenging, but the most consequential threat that the United States could face. And that this approach just strengthens deterrence by denial. It also offers the United States options for rolling back subconventional small-scale land grabs if China were to try to seize an island in the South China Sea, or Russia to seize a small piece of territory in Europe.
Well, all strategies have risks. What are the risks with that strategy?
It's definitely true. There's always a trade-off. And the risks with the high-end deterrence strategy are that you are optimizing for the wrong threat, that there ends up being a different challenge that emerges, which is a surprise, or that the United States ends up facing multiple threats simultaneously, so it has to fight more than one war concurrently. An opportunistic aggressor might try to take advantage of the fact that the U.S. is just preparing to win one large, big war. There are also concerns if the technology does not mature as expected or on the timelines that are planned or hoped for. And you're accepting some near-term risk in terms of your capabilities because you're going to have to make some cuts in your near-term capacity and give up in terms of competing day-to-day in East Asia.
So talking about China, how do you think the DoD can work with the current budget to maintain and increase their military technological edge when it comes to China?
So the current budget actually is sufficient to implement this strategy, but it does require the department to make some hard choices and to prioritize this mission, deterring China and particular threats, and to deprioritize others, and then to follow through and match strategy to resources, which requires convincing members of Congress that this is the right path forward too. So the department would need to make some cuts to its current capacity, the force size, especially within the Army. It needs to also retire some of the older weapon systems that are increasingly expensive to operate and to maintain in order to make investments in future technologies that are needed to compete with China and to acquire more near-term capabilities, which will help to mitigate the near-term risk and put the United States in a position to deter today as well as in the future.
So, Stacie, you mentioned aligning resources with strategy. So what are your recommendations, in addition to what you just said, for Pentagon leaders so that resources align better with strategy and that the department isn't spread out too thin?
Absolutely. So there are 2 buckets that I think about here, the near term and the long term. So in the near term, there are capabilities that we can acquire today, especially standoff strike preferred munitions, anti-ship munitions, anti-radiation, anti-tank, and anti-surface ones, where the inventories that we have today are not sufficient for the threat. We can improve our posture in Europe by putting in place heavy forces in Eastern Europe with air defenses, improved artillery, and other enablers. And in Asia, we can take steps to improve the resiliency of our forward posture by investing in a range of passive defenses, as well as focusing our training for operations in contested and degraded environments. In the long term, we need to continue to put a lot of money in research and development of new technologies, and especially science and technology investments in artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, undersea capabilities, bombers, penetrating or attritable intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, networks, and logistics.
Stacie, any other final recommendations do you have, especially for DoD leaders, in convincing Congress that this is the resource allocation needed for the best strategy?
One of the things that I think that the 2018 NDS, which otherwise did a great job of prioritizing and focusing on China, but one of the areas it got wrong was including the mission of great power competition, which was not very well defined. And that has led and impeded efforts of the Pentagon to focus on conventional deterrence, which should be the Pentagon's priority and the military's main mission. And I think that removing that from the military's focus and making that a whole of government effort would allow us to better be able to compete against China today and to prevent any war from occurring in the future.
All right, Stacie, thanks so much for being on the program. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.